Morning, ladies and gentlemen. I would like to call to order this special joint meeting of the Board of Johnson County Commissioners and the Johnson County Council on this day of June 17, 2020 at 10:02 a.m. And I assume we can just get right in it. Do
we have Pete Ketchum on the screen?
If you want to do, let's do a roll call real quick. You want me to do it?
Yes.
Okay. All right. We have for the commissioners, we have Kevin Walls, Brian Baird, Ron West. What?
Turn your line.
Okay. Now?
Boy, that was a setup.
I know it was, and I come on, Brian. Okay.
I did good.
So we have Kevin Walls, Brian Baird, Ron West, County Commissioners. In person, we also have Jonathan T. Myers and John Myers. And I believe on the Zoom, we have council members Pete Ketchum and
Josh McCarty.
Right? Okay. And I think your presenters are on Zoom as well from Widener and Shield.
Thank you.
Welcome.
And I assume we're going to get a presentation from Sherwin.
Yep.
And then I guess we would have opened up for any questions. So with that said, whoever is representing Sherwin, if you can please go ahead.
Great. Morning, all. This is Ken Irwin. I'm on this Zoom call with Annie Rooker and Lori Seeland, who were in charge of the project for you. I wanted to go over the classification report as well as the spreadsheets and talk about some of the options that you may want to look at going forward. I think as some of you may recall, a long time ago, it's back in 1998, we were engaged by the county at that time to be able to install a job classification study for the county council. We, at that time, interviewed all the elected officials, department heads. We drafted new job descriptions for all the county employees, returned those descriptions and had them reviewed by the elected officials. They were signed off on and became the, quote, official job descriptions of the county. The descriptions follow what's called the factor evaluation system of job classification, which I'll talk about here in a minute. The objective of the study then, as well as now, was to make sure that the jobs were in their proper classes, that the review was conducted of the Fair Labor Standards Act to see which jobs are exempt, which are non-exempt under FLSA, and they were treated properly under the wage and hour laws, and to put together a classification system built on like jobs being compared with one another. The job descriptions were updated in 2017, 2018, so those are the descriptions that we have used to point factor in this project this year. And on page, I believe, page 3 of the report, it gets into the discussion of what the factor evaluation system is. Just as a refresher, the FES is a system that was developed by the Department of Labor back in the 70s. Governor Bowen installed the system for the state of Indiana as a way to classify jobs in the state. And the reason that was selected as the system to use because it is developed for public sector employers. And it is designed to be comparable to other employers that are in the public sector, whether they be cities, counties, school corporations, and most of the counties in Indiana that have classified their jobs, and now it's, I'm sure 90% use this factor evaluation system to do that. It's not proprietary to a consultant. It is simply a way to assign factor points to the jobs based upon the job requirements, responsibility, work environment, physical effort. There's 4 core job categories that jobs are designated. First being COMET, computer office machine operation technician jobs. These jobs are support positions, are scattered throughout the various offices and departments within the courthouse and the county offices. These are jobs that you're going to see in the clerk, deputies, secretary, office managers, legal assistants, court reporters comprises this job group. Another job group is called labor, trades, and crafts. And these are jobs that are performed by skilled and unskilled labor. Most of the jobs in the labor, trades, and craft category are concentrated in the highway department, truck drivers, equipment operators, mechanics. We've got a few scattered in other facilities that maintenance and custodial jobs are part of the labor, trades, and crafts category. A third group is called PAT, professional, administrative, and technological jobs. These jobs are those that usually require a baccalaureate degree or application of equivalent knowledge and experience to the position. The environmental health specialist, IT technicians, a GIS analyst, superintendents of departments fall within this group of what we call PAT. PAT being jobs that are usually in charge of an operation or a part of a department operation, and they're in a separate category from the other 2 that I just mentioned. Finally, we have what they call protective occupations and law enforcement positions. And these are separated into 2 groups, one being the merit police officers on the sheriff's department, the second being what we call the civilian pole positions, these being jobs that are correctional officers, dispatchers, community corrections jobs, jail commanders, the animal warden fall within the civilian poll group that are not police officers or sworn as police officers. So those are the 4 core job categories that are used in the grouping of jobs. The bottom line is, once the jobs are point factored, that is assigning points to each job description based upon the content of that description, our consultants have then put together classes within the categories. So in this system, you cannot compare a truck driver to a deputy assessor. You can't compare a police officer to the manager in a health department. So we're only comparing like jobs with one another, and that extends itself on to as we begin to look at how jobs are paid, how the employees are paid, so that these jobs are being compared to like positions internally as well as to the external market. And a part of this study was the comparison of each of the job category salary schedules to the external market based upon data collected from other employers, principally public sector employers in Indiana, cities, counties, towns, and the like. So that's generally the process that we've gone through. There'll also be a handful of other jobs that are not as part of that first 4 group category, we get into special occupations. In this case, a special occupation, one job would be the probation officers. We know that they would normally be prepared, and they are prepared as a job description using the PAT guide charts, but we don't factor them in that the Indiana Judicial Conference has a pay schedule that is mandated that we have to follow. So instead of placing them in with the other PAT positions in your spreadsheets, they're taken aside and paid according to what the mandated requirement is. So as we went through this process, then we were able to make some findings internally, comparing jobs within the system, and as well as to the external market. And Addie and Lori will walk us through that piece of it. And at the end, I'm sure you'll have some questions, but we may answer some of those questions as we go through. So I'm going to go ahead and turn it over to Addie.
Good morning.
Morning.
If you will pull your spreadsheet for the LTC group, I will start there with that one and kind of walk you through the layout of the spreadsheets. So this group has 4 classification levels, and they're divided, as Kent said, by factor points. As you can see, it's on the screen here. And going across from left to right, we have divided it with we have the department, the job title, the FLSA status, the 2020 salary for each position, and then the next group is what we've called the internal analysis. And so, in order to create and ensure internal pay equity, we've established a base rate of pay, and then shown what the internal salary would be based on that hourly rate, according to the work hours of each position. So it could vary depending on the work hours for that position, and then shown the cost to bring those positions to that internal base rate. The next set of data going on to your right is the external analysis. And here we've established an external midpoint, an external low salary, and an external high. The external midpoint is the mean or the average of all the data collected for all the jobs in the external market. And then the external low salary is set at 10% below the external midpoint. And then the external high salary is set at 10% above the external midpoint. So you have a nice pay range for each classification level. And then we've also shown what the cost is to bring each position to the external midpoint, if the county were to do so, just to give you an idea of the cost for that movement to the external market. There were a couple apprentice jobs in the LTCs. These were performing the same work as the full-time. They're just on-the-job training. I wanted to point that out. We have recommended some significant pay adjustments internally for some of the positions, especially looking at the custodian positions. And I believe some of the cooks came in for some significant adjustments, a few of the truck drivers, and then we had one mechanic that was below the internal pay rate of the other mechanics, recommending a pay adjustment there. And then the apprentice foreman position in LTC 4 also came in for a significant internal pay adjustment. At the very bottom of the spreadsheet, you can see what the total cost to bring all positions to the internal base rate. For the LTC, it was just a 1.33% increase overall. And then the total cost to bring all of the positions in the LTC group to the external midpoint was 153,000, 6.75% increase overall over the current salaries. I think there were only 6 positions that were at or above the external midpoint. So overall, the LTC group, they are lagging behind the external midpoint salary. Okay. Were there any specific questions with the LTC group?
Yes, the total cost, percent increase on the internal analysis was that. I know the extra, you said the external midpoint reduced on the other one, but what's the total cost? Is that the 80% in the mid-range?
The total cost for the internal, the 30,328, is that what you're asking?
Yes. Yes. Is that like
Yes.
based on the 80%, throwing out the top 10% and the lower 10%?
Oh, for the external, yeah, the external midpoint is based on that 80, internal is based on the internal
Yeah, the internal.
internally within the county.
Bringing them up when they're even across the board, correct? He's looking at the internal. He's asking if the 10%, top 10% or low 10%. Is that taken out, or is this just to bring them up across the board for the internal?
I think her video is frozen.
Yeah, I think
We've lost her.
Teresa got it all this. She's staring at
I'm having a little hard time hearing the question. With
I can hear you.
Kent or Lori, did you hear the question? I didn't hear.
I think he was talking about the 80% when we were working with the external data. The middle 80% cutting off the top 10 and the bottom 10 and just working with the middle. But that does not apply to the internal analysis at all. I mean, it's only for the external. Internal's your own pay schedule.
Thank you.
One thing on the internal that we're going to have to consider it, hopefully once the department heads and elected officials have been able to peruse the information, any disparities or discrepancies that they need to bring that forward. I know it just what little bit I did without a whole lot of research, I found a couple of positions where they were only showing half of their salaries because half of it was, other half was coming from another source. And that of course affects the overall dollar amount to achieve that parity. So and it's kind of a moot argument at this point in time that after the elected officials, department heads have a chance to go through and look at their individual departments, they need to point out any discrepancies and then we can make those adjustments. As an example, the Vasia director is showing her salary, I think at 26 plus, and she actually gets 27,000 from the state. So, and the reason that's important is because there, to get to the internal dollar amount for adjustment, it's like, it affects about like $12,000, a huge amount. So hopefully the department heads and elected officials will take time to go through their payrolls that are implicated here and make those notes. Go ahead, Ken.
Yes.
Okay. If you'll pull up your comment group. In this group, we have four classification levels. And it's set
I think
up
Yeah, they're,
Somebody tell her.
yeah,
in much of the
have her call.
same way as the
Hey, Addie, sorry to interrupt, but you're breaking up.
some of the positions in the animal shelter.
Addie, can you hear us? And she must have a really bad connection, so we're gonna see if we can't try to get her to call in instead of being on the Zoom.
Yeah, I'll give her a call.
Okay. I can take over for her.
Okay, go ahead.
So Addie was talking about the comet positions.
Yes.
Can everyone hear me?
Yeah.
Okay, so Addie was talking about the comet positions, and the comet positions have been split into 4 classification levels. And as Kent had mentioned, the comet positions involve your computer office machine operation and technicians, positions such as in the animal shelter, the health department, recorders, deputies, and WIC were all classified within that Comet 1 level. In Comet 2, we have some more animal shelter positions, the assessors, auditors, clerk's department, the prosecutor's administrative assistants, the sheriff's administrative positions, some of the surveyors and the treasurers. Your Comet 3s had some of the higher level auditors positions, circuit court, assistant court reporters, juvenile court, Title 4D, juvenile detention center, magistrate court, the prosecutor's legal assistants and paralegals, and some of the superior court assistant court reporters. And then your Comet 4 have the highest level of the comets. And those include the court reporters, your emergency management 911 records coordinator, your magistrate court reporters, along with your superior court reporters. We did find some internal pay discrepancies in the Comet positions. For example, in Comet 1 classification level, your pay rates currently range from $11.32 per hour to $19.27 per hour. That represents a 70% spread in pay. In your Comet 2 classification levels, your ranges are from $15.80 per hour to $21.23 an hour currently. That represents a 34% spread in pay. So we went through and established an internal base rate for each classification level to correct that internal pay equity issue. So the setup for the Comets is the same as the LTCs. So your middle right section is your internal analysis, where we compared what your current county pay schedule is and where the classification levels is. So in the Comet 1s, we developed a $16.70 an hour internal hourly rate. and then the cost to bring everyone to that level. Comet 2s, we established an $18.34 hourly rate, and then the cost to get everyone to that internal. Comet 3s, we established a $20.22 hourly rate, and the cost to bring everyone to that. And then the Comet 4s, we established $22.37 hourly rate in the cost, bringing you a 2.81% increase in the current pay schedules to bring them up to an internal hourly rate. And then on the far right, we did the external analysis as Addie described with the LTCs, same format, showing you a 5.49% increase to bring everyone up to the cost of the external midpoint salary. I went through that kind of fast. Are there questions on the comments?
Looks like everybody's good.
Okay, can you hear me now?
She's back.
Yes, we can.
Okay, sorry about that. I switched over to a different device, so we'll try that. If you'll pull the civilian poll spreadsheet. This is one of your largest groups of employees. It has 6 classification levels. And in this group, we do have varying work hours. So if you'll look at the, for example, in the civilian poll 1, the internal hourly rate, we've set it at $18.15 an hour. But the internal salary will vary as you look down by position based on the annual hours that the position works. So that's why you'll see a varying salary in those columns for those positions. So I wanted to bring that to your attention. Internally, we're recommending some significant pay adjustments for several positions, looking at the animal shelter deputy wardens, the youth care managers, the community correctional officers. They're lagging behind the internal pay rate significantly. Also here we have some of the jail positions, the jail officers in charge, the jail corporals, and the shift sergeants. There seem to be a little rank differential there, so that's one of the reasons why there's some significant pay adjustments recommended for those positions. Again, several of these positions were consistently lagging the external market as well. It looked like there were about only 33 positions out of the whole civilian group that are at or above the external midpoint salary. So most of them would be coming in for an adjustment externally if they were to move to that route. Overall, for the civilian polls, was a total cost to move all the positions to the internal base rate was $131,716, which came out to be a 2.11% increase overall. And then externally, $431,088 increase, or cost to move all the positions, and a 6.92% increase. If there weren't any questions, the next group are your merit polls. Now this group, based on the rank of the department, was already aligned internally very well. So we did not do an internal analysis with this group. We did show the external analysis, And overall, the positions are very competitive with the external market, falling really close to the external midpoint or maybe slightly above, but they're all within the external range there that we've established, which is very good. Did recommend some adjustments to the lieutenants and the major ranks at the pole 3 and 4 levels to give a little more rank differential for those positions at the higher level. Overall, the total cost to bring those positions to the external midpoint was $3,928, which is less than a 1% increase there. So overall, the county's done very well with this group and staying competitive with the external market. I don't think there were any other items to point out there unless you had questions with the merit group. Oh, well, just one other item. There is one position in your merit poll 2 group. It's the prosecutor investigator. Just wanted to bring to your attention that is not a merit position, but based on the job functions of the job and comparing like jobs to each other, we've classified it with the merit group to be compensated in a fair and equitable manner with the other like jobs. Okay. The next group are PATs. And this group has 5 classification levels. And again, we had some significant variance in salaries within the groups, and tried to establish some internal pay equity by establishing those internal base hourly rates and salaries based on the hours worked. This was probably one of I think the group that had the highest percent increase to move all positions to the internal base rate. So I think that it would be a priority for looking at internal pay equity among the PAT classifications. Several of the positions were recommending some significant pay adjustments, including the assessor, certified appraisers, the juvenile case managers and the community corrections. Let's see, there's a quality assurance position in the community corrections. We had, I'm trying to find the other couple other positions in the juvenile department, juvenile detention department, community corrections. There were in the PAT 5s 2 positions, one the IT, the GIS administrator, and then the deputy director for the highway also had significant pay adjustments that we're recommending to create that internal pay equity among those positions. So overall for the PATs, the adjustment to the internal base was $184,000, a 5.24% increase. And then to bring all the PAT positions up to the external midpoint salary was $325,861, which is a 9.23% increase over the current salaries for all those positions up to the external midpoint. Okay. The next group are your special occupations. And this group, we were direct job matched to the external market. And then we've established what we've shown here. It's set up just a little bit different. So we've got the current salaries, and then we've got an external midpoint, and then an external salary range. So it's set up a little viewed a little differently. This range is the low end for these are set at 10% below the external midpoint, and then the high is at 20% above the external midpoint. So a little broader range allows for a little more competitiveness with the external market and a little more leeway in recruitment and retention of some of these specialized positions here in the SO group. We do have 3 positions I want to point out in the Sheriff's Department: the Chief Deputy, the Matron, and the Jail Commander. Their FLSA status is excluded, which basically means they're political appointments of the sheriff and serving at the pleasure of the sheriff. So those positions have a little different FLSA status tied to those statutes. The total cost to bring these positions up to the external midpoint was $9,782, just a 1.32% increase. Most of the positions were fairly competitive within the external range. And the other position there at the bottom, the deputy coroner, those positions are paid on a per call basis. So we've shown you what the external market is paying. Other counties are paying those positions for calls, and you're right within that range, a very competitive pay rate for those positions as well. Let's see, the next group. Let's look at the attorneys. So for this group, again, it's a little different setup. What we have shown you at the top are your current pays and the positions that fall in this attorney category, another SO group. And what we are recommending are 3 pay levels for attorneys. And we've established a pay range for each level. And really this provides for your entry level positions and some movement within a range to be able to hire in attorneys and then move them throughout that range based on either the time in the position, experience, or the type of cases. And then a mid-level of attorneys, and then this upper level, which is the 3 level, which would be either attorneys with high profile cases, high level felonies, ones that are supervising and training or overseeing other attorneys, or the upper level attorneys over, in the county in general. And really leaving it up to looking at defining that criteria, having the prosecutor and the judge and commissioners define those criteria and how they're going to set that pay, but gives them a little latitude in moving attorneys through ranges and being able to recruit and retain qualified individuals in those positions and be competitive with the external market. The next group, let's see. These are your first deputies, the chief deputies, first deputies. And again, these are politically appointed positions of the elected officials here. And because of that, we've given you a couple pay options for them. One, we've looked at option 1, the external average of other chief or first deputy positions, and shown you the cost to move those positions to that pay rate. Or the second option is setting specifically tying the chief deputy, first deputy salary to the elected official because of the political appointed status, and setting that pay at 85% of the elected official's salary. So it's the current 2020 salary, and this could be adjusted, moving forward with the pay as the elected official's salaries change. But for an example of cost, we've shown you the current salaries and 85% of that. So for option 1, the total cost to move the positions was $30,279, an 8.43% increase. For option 2, it was $19,401, a 5.41% increase. And we have adjusted the chief deputy coroner position based on the hours worked, and adjusted that so it's not reflective of a full-time schedule. And we're almost there. We've got 2 spreadsheets left. Next is the elected officials. And this is just a raw comparison of the county's elected official salaries compared to the counties that were included in the salary analysis. So you can see the average salary at the bottom for each elected official. And then the external salary range is the raw data. So it's the lowest salary and the highest salary of those elected officials surveyed. So it gives you a good snapshot of the comparisons of the elected officials to this group of counties. And then the very last spreadsheet is just the cost summary, showing you the overall cost to bring all the positions to the internal base, and then all the positions to the external midpoint. So we've totaled everything up for you from the individual spreadsheets. And to move all the positions to the internal base salary was $483,327, which was an overall 2.86% increase over the county's current salaries. But noting there that does not include positions in the merit poll, the chief or first deputies, or the SO positions. So then looking at the cost to the external midpoint, was total cost to move all the positions to the external midpoint was $1,210,467, which is a 5.75% increase over your current salaries. And I believe that covers all the spreadsheets. Lori, was there anything that I missed there?
Her side.
Do you have any questions?
The other internal finding was that the county has a senior assistant court reporter position in the magistrate court. And that position factors in the same classification level as the assistant court reporters. So we would recommend council set a stipend for that position to $500 to $1,000 annually added to the base to maintain that rank structure for that position. I think we covered on all the other discrepancies that we found.
This is Pete Ketchum. I have a question, if you could hear me.
We can hear you.
Okay, hey, for the different groups, the different spreadsheets, for example, let's take the midpoint tally, the total cost. Many of the salaries are above the midpoint estimation. does your total, when you total those for the individual groups, you're not lowering any salaries to get that total, are you? You're just moving the ones that are under up to the recommended?
That's correct.
Okay.
Yes, we're not recommending any pay cuts. The county, the only recommendation we would do if they were above, you could freeze those positions until the salaries catch up.
Very good. I just wanted to make sure I was thinking along the right lines. Thank you.
You're welcome.
I do have a question, I guess. Did we consider throwing out Hamilton County and Brown County out of this analysis, since those two don't even compare to anything we have? Their tax revenue base, their number of people in the county, nothing compares here, and that would throw out your high and your low, which I think would make a more fair comparison.
Well, again, we took the 80% of the data. So some of those may not have been included or may have. Hamilton County wasn't necessarily the leader in all areas. So I think that's important to keep in mind.
They're the leader in most areas, though.
In most areas, yes. But may not have been always the one to get cut out.
Well, I'm sorry, go ahead.
Wouldn't that have been thrown out in the top 10%?
I don't know if it was or not, but I feel it should be.
It wasn't thrown out because it's listed. Whatever's listed was utilized in the base number.
I mean, in anything I've ever done in business, in a comparative as far as wages and increases, is we would look at different companies and throw out the high and the low, depending on how big the companies were, and it's how we would establish ours. It's worked for years, but in most things like that, estimations like this, I think you would throw out a high and a low anyway. So I'm just questioning if that was done or not.
Well, the high and the low was cut out, where you're cutting out the lowest 10% and you're cutting out the highest 10%. So it may be Hamilton County, it may not. I think you've got so much data in here. One county or one city pay schedule is not going to move the needle that much. You've got thousands of jobs and thousands of salaries that are a part of this. We've also, in addition to all the county and city salary information, we've also got a database of Bureau of Labor statistics that we've looked at, and other surveys that we've purchased. So it's really, I think, a wash in terms of picking one county over another, because we have used that middle 80% to determine the external analysis.
I have a question, John Myers, County Council. On the, you said the quarter to give a stipend to yearly. Should we consider the other stipends that other departments employees might receive into this salary study?
Oh no, Addie, you want to take that?
I didn't hear the question.
Question is, you said something about a court reporter getting a stipend yearly to bring their pay up. Should we also consider the other departments, some of the other departments' employees receive stipends yearly? Should we consider that into this study also? Part of their pay?
I would think the stipend would be a rare exception. This one particular one was to make sure that the senior had some additional pay because as it was factored, it still was factoring within the same category. The other option would have been to add another tier to the classification just for that one job. But I think generally speaking, you don't have very many exceptions where you would be paying an additional stipend unless you can tie it to some reason and justify it, because we want to make sure that we can defend the system of having jobs that are factored the same, pay in close proximity, unless there is some rational reason to make that kind of stipend adjustment.
I'm not sure that answered your question, did it, John? I didn't think it did. I think what Councilman Myers was saying is that we have some wages that have stipends and bonuses to them at this point, and those were not considered, we are assuming, in your wages that you had, because you only had wages of hourly or whatever yearly salary, not stipends and bonuses. Is that correct?
That's correct. Just looking at the base salary of the positions.
So we should include those stipends when we look at this for their base salary.
Yeah, if you've got some stipend tied to a special technical piece of the job, or if it's tied to performance, then as long as you can make that link to justify it, and when you get into things like performance pay, they need to be justified on a reliable performance evaluation program, and they need to be applied consistently throughout the organization, as not to just be a fund, if you will, to reward certain employees that we want to without any predetermined criteria.
Any other questions?
Is Josh McCarty able to talk if he has a question?
He is able to talk.
Okay.
I'm just listening right now, but yes, I am able to talk. I guess, I mean, I just have a statement, not really a question. I just think, the question for the elected officials, for the council and the commissioners, here we find ourselves kind of in this unprecedented year, and we don't really know what the outcome is going to be. Looking into our crystal ball, what's going to be our economic situation down the road. And so, we have all these unknowns, and yet obviously this study shows that we have some real discrepancies in pay. So, how do we take all these different variables and mesh them into a plan to get some of these salaries up? And then, of course, you throw in your annual salary increases, your annual adjustments that we make during budget hearings. So it's gonna put us in a real interesting time, to say the least. To come up with a plan, and I think we just need to take a deliberate approach on how we're going to do that. Whether that's going to be over a couple of years, whether that's going to be all at one time, but it's going to be interesting to see how we can come up with a game plan to get this done.
That is an excellent point, and we've kind of reinforced that in the report at the end on page 8 and 9, talking about the elements of a pay philosophy, if you will, and putting together a plan where with the spreadsheets, it does provide you with some basic options. One being looking at the internal analysis alone. And usually that is the first step, is to get the alignment of salaries within the organization in a close proximity. So that's one option. The external option is we're costing it out to a midpoint. So that gives you a target. It doesn't assume that you have finances that you can just wave a wand and move everyone to that level in one fell swoop. Developing a plan over 2 years, 3 is something that you may want to consider. So as you look at how that's going to play out, I really think it's best to have a basic philosophy as to, if we're going to have an across-the-board raise, is that going to be related more to the external market, or is that going to be something that we're going to try to deal with these internal adjustments that have been identified as the part of the study? So those items are laid out at the end of the report, and then beyond that, beyond this report, beyond next year, is for council to put in place some mechanism for maintaining the system so that you're not going through this again in 2 or 3 years, that you make the system institutionalized to the extent that the classifications are adopted, the salaries are based on the classifications, and that moving forward to make a change, then those jobs that are added to the system later on, or those jobs that are evolving and change, would have to go through the same process, where you're not just picking salaries out of thin air to set for a new position or for a reclass that you've had presented to you. This system will allow the council to take a more proactive approach to how they maintain their pay schedules in the future. But a lot of this, I think, would be best memorialized in your salary ordinance itself, so that it's not only a list of your salaries, but it's also a list of your pay policy that explains what the intent is, so that all the elected officials and employees have a better understanding of how the plan has been put together and how it's going to affect them and how it's going to be processed into the future.
Did everybody hear that? I know that was a little tough. Ken, you may have a paper on your microphone or something of your computer that we heard. I think we heard most of that.
Okay.
Do you have your microphone covered on your computer with paper or something?
No, I'm on my phone actually.
Oh, yeah, you're having some issues. I think we heard you for the most part, but you were pretty quiet.
Okay.
Yeah, I actually heard him externally fine, so just for the record.
You know, we're not hearing him well in here. And this might, I don't know if this is a proper time to bring this up or not, but and I don't know, Josh, I may have said something to you about this a couple of years ago or so, about the possibility of the council and commissioners working together to come up with an increase percentage, as we can do if we do it prior to a certain date. Is that not correct, Sheena? We can have a recommendation.
Yes, you can have a recommendation. We're supposed to present you, the county executive is supposed to present the council by August 20th.
August 20th. And I would like to maybe look at that in us coming up with maybe a combined effort there to come up. What I'm trying to avoid is what I saw happen last year and the prior year, to where we're all over the board and everything's scattered. People in different areas are getting different raises. I want to just be able to come up with a recommendation for a flat increase across the board, given to the department heads and elected officials, and then they can scatter it how they want to scatter it. But it always seems to be an issue ever since I've been here. Every year we fight this. And I think this would be a way to avoid that. It's set when you come in, they know what the percentage is. We don't go one way or the other. It is what it is.
You don't talk about that, just a flat rate of 3%.
A flat percentage, yes. And
I mean, that's what we've done for years, and this is where we're at today with the numbers.
but it's still, it's that way, it's based on production or,
If they do that.
yes, if they do that.
Brian, I mean, and I agree. I think, as just speaking for myself as a council member, I'd welcome any input that the commissioners have. And, obviously this is a total team effort between everybody for our employees. So I'm 100% behind that. Speaking specifically to what you said is across the board. I mean, that's kind of in a way what we've done, right? I mean, we've said, hey, you can take your 3%, here's 3%. And it wasn't, I guess, given equally and equitably, but it was given to the elected officials to spread it accordingly. And so, but then along with that, during budget hearings, you'd have some employees that were completely, out of whack, and some things would change, and you would need to bring this person up, 8% to get them in line because their salaries were so off. So that's kind of, what we've been doing. It's also the reason that we needed to, I think, have this study done is to try to fix some of those discrepancies.
Yeah, and it's a good basis, and I agree, Josh, and as you know, I was all for that. But in what you said, if we determine a percentage as commissioners in the council, and that percentage is given to the elected officials and directors and whoever gets it, the prosecutor's office, whatever, they have these same sheets. They can have these same sheets we have, and they can take care of those detriments or those deductions as they have it in their sheet. They can be responsible for bringing these people in line to where they're supposed to be using that straight across percentage that they're given. So really, it would be putting that responsibility on the elected officials and the department heads that are working with those people to bring those wages in line as they should, according to the basis that we give them, that we got from Wagner. That makes sense, what I said?
Yes. What I'd like to see is a couple council members, maybe a commissioner, get together, come up with some options to how to address some of these lower paid positions. I know Josh McCarty's not have a lot of time. He's been on several committees. Rob Henderson's been on several different committees I have. I didn't know if John Myers or Pete Ketchum or somebody else would like to take the lead on that and form a committee with 2 or 3 council members, but maybe a commissioner if they're willing to come up with some options to get some of these pays up. Pete, would you be willing to be part of that? Pete,
I sure would. Yeah, I'm going to take off here in a minute, but yeah, I'm happy to do that.
Would you like to lead that, or Jonathan Dean?
Sure. And I'd like to just thank the people that prepared this report. I think it's a great report, and it's a great tool for us. I know it's not a recommendation. The recommendation is going to have to come from all of us. But I do think that this tool is a good start. And I think the internal analysis, I think it's going to have to address. But altogether, I think it boils down to exactly what Brian said, in that the department heads and the elected officials should be within their own realm of keeping it below some ceiling that we have set that's going to enable us to keep our current conservative outlook in the county. So many councils before us have put us in the great position we're in. And I know that we're going to see this pay network going through right now in 18 months. So I know we'll all have to consider that.
Would a commissioner like to be part of that? Hey, Ron.
I knew Ron would jump all over that.
That's what I meant. So, with Ron, Jonathan T. Myers, and Pete Ketchum, if you want to reach out to James or Josh Turner, see if they're available to be part of it also, one of those two. Sherman?
Sounds like it's,
I was just
What you're saying is.
I was just suggesting that someone from the auditor's office not necessarily have input on your decisions, but to be able to supply you with information from the past as how things were handled and help some calculations and things. If
Put somebody, get with Pam and she'll, if somebody's in her office.
You know, whatever decisions are made by the council, they end up, the ones that instituted anyway.
I would also like to see elected officials and department heads to submit to the council employees that are receiving stipends yearly, so we can compare that with their base salary.
we can also get that information through payroll, I believe.
Okay.
Is that?
How does that show up on payroll when they have a bonus or a stipend?
It's different if they're paid from a grant or it's just according to how they're paid, but they'll have a different number that money is denoted from, and then we can tie back a number to an employee, show exactly, give you a history of where it came from, what it was for, and how much it was paid.
So it's recognizable or denominable at that point.
Yeah.
That makes sense. That makes sense.
I have a request of those that are more senior. Should we include grants in this also?
It's part of their pay. That, I mean, if we're doing that,
maybe they don't get.
History has proven that they're pretty steady, and that's where some of the numbers you get will give you that information as well.
And if it would become a term that is not steady, you can make that adjustment at that time. Right. Because if they're not getting the grant money for that work, they're probably not doing that work anyway.
I think it would be good to know just to give us an opinion of the base salary and the overall outlook before we make any decisions individually or as a group.
Okay, first meeting in August, you guys have enough time, come up with some ideas.
One thing that actually there's a couple of things we need to consider in advance of any meeting. And that would be, are we willing to adopt a system that gives no credit for tenure or performance? So when you begin to equalize or standardize pay, in other words, bring these people up, then you're going to, in effect, have a system that gives no credit for tenure or performance. And the other thing is, if you're trying to standardize pay, then is there a willingness amongst the elected officials and department heads to reduce some salaries? So you can't have parity, you can't bring an equalization in without bringing some people down. And I doubt seriously that there's a willingness amongst any of you to do that. So those are the things you have to consider going forward. Is the other thing is, if you're always going to have a system like we currently have that has some reflection of tenure and merit involved in it, you're always going to have disparity in positions. So you take, whether it's Comet, Pole, or any of them, you're going to have people that come in today at this salary level. And over a period of time, they're going to climb that ladder. But 3% of 30,000 is not comparable, obviously, to 3% of 50,000. Somebody's been in that department for 15 years. So you're always going to have it. There's just absolutely, unless you just go to flatlining, everybody comes in and start at this salary and regardless of tenure or performance. And I just abhor a system of that nature.
Yeah,
so we got to be able, first off, we got to agree, are we going to look at a system that does give credit for tenure and performance? And if we are, then we can move forward. I think, in a positive fashion. Are we willing to reduce salaries in this process? That's another thing. It's going to be a critical issue, because if you've got somebody at the high end of this spectrum, in order to give some parity in there, there might be a situation where you have to reduce somebody's salary. So that needs to be thought about. And then going to the bonuses and stipends, I hate to always pick on the prosecutor, and I saw Joe with his hand up a minute ago, so I know he has something to say, but I can remember over the years, and I'm not sure if we're still doing that or not, Joe, but I think it was Title IV money that the prosecutor had discretion on and to award bonuses with those funds. And it would be like $25,000 a year. And I can remember in the past, the prosecutor, one person in his office would get like 16,000 of that, and then two other people would get a little bit of what's left. So that's the other thing. Are we going to consider bonuses and stipends? And then beyond that, we have licensing and certification and educational credits or continuing education, things like that we pay for on certain employees. So, I mean, it's a broad spectrum when you begin to talk about overall salary and what goes into those salaries. So it's going to be, I think it's a worthwhile exercise, and we really need it. Going back to the council, though, actually the council is responsible for determining whatever monies are going to be available for wage and salary increase. And that's really predicated on our revenue sources. If we've got funds available, if we look like our revenue sources are going to be such that we can allow. I mean, you guys do that. I'm not telling you anything here. You look at what's available, and based on that, well, I think we can do 3%, we can do 4%, but this year we can't do nothing. So it's really based on revenue, but it's council's responsibility to, even though we like to help in that regard, it's really your responsibility.
We have the ability to make a recommendation.
Yeah, we can always make a recommendation.
We're not the ones to make the decision on it, but we can make a recommendation. I just think it brings the council and commissioners together more if we can do that. I mean, make that recommendation.
I was going to ask Joe, but I know he had his hand up.
Yeah, I just had one clarification question. I was having some discussion about, for departments like mine, I do have to take stipends, and I'm having to help report that stuff. I just want to know, do you want me to do that? Because we talk about the department, and then Pam offered to kind of help too. So I'm having to send this stuff on my department. You know, I don't know. Should I do it? Who do you want me to send it to?
I think you.
I have it all of record, Joe.
Okay, that's fine. I just don't want to duplicate efforts.
Okay. Yeah, I think it would be better coming from the auditor's office. It'd probably be closer to, be hard for you to find it all probably, wouldn't it? Not?
I can get it off, but she's will do it. Thank you, Pam.
Well, he's good though, yeah.
I'd like to offer and throw out as a question too, and I agree with you, Ron. I think that we need to add productivity in there too, and I think the only way we can gauge that is by their immediate supervisors. So that's where it comes in, and I believe this tool that we have here, it's just that it's a tool, and when they show a straight percentage down the line, that's a click and a drag, and we're not clicking and dragging on each individual. That should be the supervisor and elected official.
And that's what I was saying. If you give them the money to work with, and they have these sheets that we have as basis, they can use that. Or
it's a great tool.
Yeah, and they can use that to determine what they do with the percentage that they're given. And they can, they know the disparity. Every department head in here, every elected official in here, you know the disparities, you know the people that are doing the job in your organizations, and that should be up to you to make those determinations. And it might be a little painful sometimes with some people, but I think what you're probably looking at for the most part, just honestly, is I think you'll see the elected officials and department heads, they may not take money away from somebody, but they may hold any raises on that person until everything catches up over the next few years as we try to get a better pattern. But I think common sense will just prevail on that. I think we're gonna be beating people with it. I would hope. I wouldn't want to as a elected official or department head.
Whatever we come out of the committee with will be a recommendation.
Yes, sir.
I think that's what they've been doing over the last few years. Giving people less, giving people more, but they're still trying to keep people at or above. There's just not gonna, 30% doesn't go a long ways. There were some employees and some were way underpaid.
And it may take them getting real serious about holding raises and things like that to get up to that point. But again, this, the council knows there's only so much money to work with, and once you determine what that is, then that's what we all have to live with.
I after what Joe said, actually Amy sent me a text, so I think it probably would be a good idea that any of the departments that have part of their base salaries based on a bonus or a stipend, or if you're paid from I don't know, a different fund from the state or something, it might be a good idea for them to go ahead and send it in, just to make sure that one person is not missing all the information or adding to when it shouldn't be there. So I think that's probably a pretty good idea, coming from both sources, and then we have something to compare by. I mean, not just the prosecutor's office, but all the other offices as well.
Who do I send it to?
I'll make sure it gets to the committee if you want to send it to me.
Will do.
And Amy says we can send a memo out later.
That works.
I agree, somebody coming in today, starting here, should be starting out as everybody else. I don't know if that falls on the department head, like official, or for the commissioners, or.
Well, one thing that we need to look at, I think, is part of this process is certain job classifications that have a high turnover rate. And there I'm thinking of COs, correctional officers, where you really have a high turnover rate. And we've said for years that we really need to do something there for the ability to retain people, because there is a cost, obviously, as you know, in the turnover rate. You got trying to retrain. So that ought to be a part. I'm trying to think of some things beyond just the dollars that we give people, but some of the things that really affect the salaries in those positions. Just kind of throw that out there as a little feedback.
You have the professional licensing, things like that, and then like you said, the COs, you'll have $4,500 to $5,000 in training, get the CO ready to go.
Yeah.
In the jail. You lose that after a couple months because your pay's low. That's killer. You could give them that money and probably be a benefit.
Yeah.
Those are things that I agree with. Those probably need to be considered. I think that's always been considered. I think the council's always looked at that kind of stuff. It's been entertaining, educating. Whole year has.
We're looking for feedback, so you have I know you got my email address, so I'd be happy to hear your thoughts and opinions on where you're at in this process, and that'll help us somewhat too in this committee.
So what we're looking at in the committee is Jonathan T. We've got Pete and Ron West, correct? Is that the committee at this point? One other council member.
I know Mr. Curry and Mr. Henderson, members of the committee still are.
I think once that final one is determined, maybe if we could send out an email to the department heads and other elected officials so they know who to contact with any information or other things for that committee.
Date and the time and then Zoom.
And we can do that.
Present to council commissioners in August.
Yes.
August, it's gonna be tight. Yeah, I think it's gonna have to be August. I don't think we can get it done.
August 10th. Is that what you're waiting for?
Thank you.
You're welcome.
That's the meeting.
Kent, we want to thank you and your people for the job you've done. It's always good to see and hear from you.
Well, thank you very much, and we certainly appreciated all the cooperation assistance we got from the county officials, particularly Barb Davis, and she's done a great job of helping us coordinate this.
Appreciate all the help. As usual, it's always a concerted effort. We get her done when we need to get her done, so appreciate it. Hopefully see you at a conference maybe this year, Ken, if we get to have one.
Let's keep our fingers crossed.
I'm hearing AIC is going to happen, so.
Yeah.
Last I heard, so maybe we can meet up there and at least listen to what you got to say again. Appreciate it, y'all.
Very good. Thank you very much.
Thank you.
We can adjourn.
Anybody got any questions to the audience? Fine. I'll move for adjournment then, sir.
Have a motion to say we're adjourned. Thank you very much, all.
Thank you. Yeah, good.